Happy Thursday to everyone out there, and thank you for joining us again on another edition of Research Fantasy Presents, the NBA Fantasy Baller podcast / video series. We are here to bring you the best analysis we can on season-long fantasy NBA news. I'm hoping that within the next couple of weeks here, I'll change my background to something a little more appropriate, but I'm still cleaning up from Christmas. That's not a joke. That's 100% completely serious. We overdid it here, so we're still putting away decorations, putting away presents, and I'm hoping by next Christmas to be stabilized. That would be really, really great. But yeah, until then, huge week in the NBA. I mean, what else can we say? We're dealing with two All-Stars, and not just two All-Stars, but we're dealing with two All-Stars from teams that could be in the NBA Finals, losing their top or at least top two player for the remainder of the regular season, or at least it looks like. Obviously, the most important person to talk about at this point in time is Kevin Durant, and that was just awful. You got to feel for him because that was something that was just completely out of his ability to stop. I mean, when Zaza fell back, Durant's eyes, as you're taught, were up at the ball so that he could get the board, and his knee just buckled back. And it was ugly to see live, and you can tell that it was going to be something that wasn't going to be shaken off and moved on from. First and foremost, speedy recovery to Kevin Durant. I'm sure that he's never going to hear this or know that we're thinking about him, but of course everybody is. I mean, if you love the NBA, whether you hate the Warriors or not, you don't want to see one of the best players in the league lose time because of an injury like this. Overall, yes, this dramatically affects the Warriors' season. This puts their ability to take that top spot into peril. I mean, it's really tough to say if this team is actually going to be able to outlast the competition, especially the San Antonio Spurs. I think the Houston Rockets are well enough in the rear view that they're not too much of a concern. But yeah, Greg Popovich is he's like the Randy Orton for all you wrestling fans out there of coaches. He's going to see the opportunity to strike, and like the Viper, he's going to strike. In terms of fantasy impact, this is going to be interesting, and this couldn't have come at a worse time because if you're watching the Warriors play, Steph looks horrible. I mean, he airballed at least 3 threes against the Wizards, and that's pretty significant because this isn't a guy who's typically putting up duds. We're used to him bombing away, turning around, knowing the shot's going to go in. His confidence isn't there, and that's not a good thing. That's not going to lead to Warrior wins. You'd have to assume that his usage is going to go up somewhat. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Durant's taking a lot of shots. Those are going to be spread around. Curry's going to take a few more. Klay Thompson, his statistics were really interesting because of all the players for the Golden State Warriors in 2016, 2017, Klay was the only one who didn't see movement in his shot total, meaning Durant coming over did not have an impact on the amount of shots that he was taking per game. His production it feels like it's been pretty similar to what we saw last year, right? I mean, he's generally coming in around that 30 fantasy points a night. He has games where he's 35, 40. He'll have 2 or 3 games a year where he's 50 to 65 when his shot's really falling and he's getting a couple of boards, assists, steals, things of that nature. He's going to see a couple more shots. He's the one I think I'm most interested in. And if you took him in season-long leagues, congratulations, because he's going to be the guy that really pushes you through down the stretch. I don't think there's any question about that. From another perspective, Draymond Green and Andre Iguodala both have a lot to gain from this situation because Durant is a great ball handler. And with him off the court, that now means the ball has to be in Draymond Green's hands more and Andre Iguodala's hands more when Dre's not on the court. Now, we saw in the games that Durant missed, which I think he sat out a game. He might have even sat out the game right before he got hurt. And then he sat out against the Nets, came back to play the Sixers, then got hurt against the Wizards. So we saw Dre really bomb it in that Nets game. He came back against the Sixers, and then once Durant was gone, I think you kind of saw it click in him where maybe he knew that this was something that was going to be more of a long-term impact. I would expect to see those all-star numbers come back for Draymond Green. And Andre Iguodala, he's probably available in some leagues. I think that a lot of people took him or have picked him off the waiver wire because he's been decent. And he's been the Warriors' sixth man with no Mo Spates. You know, you start looking at their bench, and I think that's where you really start to get concerned. And this is why it isn't an inevitability that Greg Popovich could sneak up on him. The bench isn't that great. Sean Livingston is decent, but he's not a volume scorer. He's a good ball handler. He's a great basketball player, don't get me wrong, but situationally, it's not great for him in terms of his production with the offense. David West could be. I mean, he's averaging a pretty decent per 36, but the problem is he's playing less than half of that. JaVale McGee is not going to get it done. Zaza is kind of a one-trick pony, and his production is not going to be sustained as teams start to say, okay, now we have to guard him. We can't just leave him open to do what he does. I don't have a lot of faith in guys like Ian Clark and Patrick McCaw, and the Warriors had to sign and immediately waive Jose Calderon to bring in Matt Barnes, who I am a fan of, and it's kind of interesting that now the Warriors have the same last name starting lineup. You get it? Harrison Barnes, Matt Barnes, haha. Anyway, I like Matt Barnes, but he's a hothead, and I could see there being a lot of problems between him and Dre, and I don't like where he falls on the fantasy spectrum, and he's far too inconsistent with what he does. It's gonna be a tough one. I mean, in these situations, I'd love to say it's easy. Just go out and pick up this guy because this guy's hurt. He's going to get the production. I just don't think you're not going to hit the waiver wire. Okay, I'm going to pick up Draymond Green or Klay Thompson or Steph Curry or for the most part, Andre Iguodala. So if you had to, I mean, Patrick McCaw, I think, could be a decent stash if you're sitting in a decent position where you can take the risk. Maybe you're trying to climb from 3 to 2 or 2 to 1, and you need maybe one extra guy who you can plug in who could end up getting you 20 fantasy points-ish a game. McCaw could be your guy. I'm not entirely sure how that's going to work out. I think we'll see how it starts to look tonight. Similarly, the Toronto Raptors are without their star point guard, Kyle Lowry, for 4 to 6 weeks as well. And again, it was one of those situations where it looked just as simple as let's go hit the waiver wire and pick up Corey Joseph, but he's been a disaster. I mean, he does not look good, and he's not had very tough matchups. I mean, he just had a matchup against New York that he wasn't really able to put together. So I do have some concerns there. Ultimately, again, you're looking at DeMar DeRozan. It's morning. I have to have my coffee. You're looking at DeMar DeRozan, and he's not available. The one guy I could see getting a little bit more of an opportunity is Norman Powell. It's between Norman Powell and DeLon Wright, and I just don't think they're ready to hand the keys to DeLon Wright. I think what you could see is Norman Powell come in like he did yesterday when Joseph was struggling, and he put up a good stat line. Granted, a lot of it was in like the last, and really it wasn't. It really wasn't too much in junk time. He did have, I think, 12 to 14 points plus a couple of boards and assists before the game was out of hand and he was back in. it's just a skeptical pickup. That's all I'm saying. I think that, again, if you're trying to make that last push and you're grasping at straws and guys to get you to the promised land, I don't think he's bad. I mean, what are you really looking for right now in the waiver wire? What do you think is out there? You're playing 12-team leagues, 15 spots deep. You're going well into the 150 top players in the NBA. There's not much left. I hate to break it to you. There's not going to be too many guys that are left out on the waiver wire that you can just go and grab and say, all right, I'm good with this. All right, moving on from there. Interesting. Let me just throw this out there. One of those guys could be Jamal Murray. Jameer Nelson was not able to play last night. Murray did good. He didn't do great. He started great. It looked like we were going to be seeing the dawn of an actual 2016-17 rookie who could play, because we haven't seen it. I mean, you're looking at both Dario Saric and Joel Embiid as being our top potential NBA Rookie of the Years, neither of them taken in this year's draft. First year playing, but not taken in this draft. Malcolm Brogdon, probably the best player out of this draft. But Murray looked like he was going to come in strong, had a great first quarter, really didn't produce much in the second quarter, and then he was kind of average meh through the remainder of the game. But if they determine that they want to push the youth movement out there in Denver, and I think a lot of that is going to have to do with how they start to finish down the stretch. If they're competing for that 8th spot, they might not want to put their rookie out there so quick. They might want to rely on Jameer Nelson for a little bit longer. But I would definitely have to say Murray could be a good pickup. But then again, when you get a point guard, you're hoping that you get the ball handling, the assists that go along with it. And he did have 5 assists, but as long as Nikola Jokic is on that team, Murray won't be the premier ball handler. So that's just something to put in consideration. But like I said, you don't have much to work with. There's not a lot of guys who could see opportunity that are going to be left on the waiver wire. Let's talk Jimmy Butler a little bit. I mentioned in our podcast yesterday, and I will admit that I've kind of softened on the stance, and I'm waiting for him to prove me wrong tonight. And you can check out our NBA DFS picks for FanDuel, DraftKings, and Fantasy Draft. That will be posted right after this is posted to YouTube. And I think I'm back on the Jimmy Butler train. But he just looked listless. He didn't have energy. This is a Bulls team that needs Butler to show them that he's the leader. And I just find the timing poor. Post All-Star break, post trade deadline, he didn't get moved. He's still in Chicago. I'm really hoping it wasn't a situation where he wanted to go to a contender, because as bad as things are for the Bulls right now, that's a team with a lot of history. Jordan set that team up in a position that for the next 50 years at least, whoever's the star of that team has a chance to be one of the faces of the NBA, because Jordan was the face of the NBA for so long. It's a great situation for Butler. He just needs to play 100% of the time with energy. The only guys on the court Tuesday night playing with any kind of interest were Rajon Rondo and Dwayne Wade. And I'm sorry, I love Dwayne Wade, but if Butler is getting outplayed by someone who's like 10 years older than him, something's got to give, man. You got to step your game up. You got to show that you are the guy on this team. You have to be selfish at times, and we'll just keep that there. I think he's a great play tonight against Golden State. Without Durant, they're going to have Barnes/Iguodala in there. Those guys are great players, but they're not going to stop Jimmy Butler if Jimmy Butler doesn't want to be stopped. Let's move on to the Phoenix Suns. This is a place, these last two teams we're going to talk about specifically because if you're looking for some guys to put on your fantasy team down the stretch, I think you're going to find them here. Phoenix at this point has moved guys like Brandon Knight and PJ Tucker, obviously, to Toronto, and Tyson Chandler back to the bench. So you're seeing guys like Alex Len, Alan Williams, Tyler Ulis, TJ Warren is getting more minutes. All of these guys have an increased opportunity down the stretch. Now, you're not going to get your Eric Bledsoes, your Devin Bookers. Those guys are off the waiver wire. They were drafted early. You're not going to get them, but there's a lot of value to be had out there from the Phoenix Suns. I think that that's a great target down the stretch because Earl Watson is not going to hesitate to hit 25 minutes with Len, with Williams. Marquise Chris, as long as he's not in foul trouble, is going to see 25 to 33 minutes. Warren is, 28 to 35 minutes. Ulis is going to get 17 to 20 minutes. So there's a lot of value and a lot of minutes out there for guys who have yet to really prove themselves. Len has, and that's the fact of the matter is, I will always be an Alex Len truther. We've seen Len put up some huge games in the past when he's been given the opportunity. Now, a lot of those came sans Eric Bledsoe, but at the same time, that is a perfect distribution system because Len is big and lanky and he's starting to get a little more physical, and that's just a great dump-off spot for Bledsoe. Allen Williams is the same way. He's a big guy. He can get physical. He's really starting to adapt to the game. I wouldn't be surprised to see him finish out stronger than Len this year, but the Suns need to commit to that front court. I think there's a lot of talent there with Marquise Chris, Dragan Bender, Alex Len, and Allen Williams. I think that might be laughed at by a lot of the league because they're so young, but in 3 years, that could be a very formidable front court. On the opposite side of things, but not really, Sacramento Kings are an absolute mess. They're a disaster. The Nets did away with them on the road last night. This is the Nets now who twice in a row on the West Coast have really taken it to those teams. The Warriors escaped unscathed, but Sacramento was not so lucky. I'm still preaching Skal Bass. He's going to get minutes. It's very clear that Dave Yeager has a belief in him. He's raw. He's going to give you games where he's, 0-3 and 5 fouls in 12 minutes. I don't doubt that at all. But his hustle, his ability to get into the position, to make stuffs, to grab boards, to be a nuisance on defense, it's all there. Biggest slight against him outside of the propensity I could see him having to fail is just the fact that he's scrawny. He's going to get pushed around. You saw it last night with Brook Lopez just moving him around at will. They actually had to take him out and bring Costa Koufis back in, so that should tell you all you need to know right there. But he's a guy I would definitely eyeball. The rest, this guard situation is being touted all over the place as being a great place to pick up value, and I don't necessarily disagree as DFS punts, but who are you going to trust and when? So you've got Collison, Ty Lawson, Ben McLemore, Buddy Hield, Langston Galloway, who's getting no run, which is the craziest thing of all to me, considering he is probably the most talented of all of those guys that I just mentioned, and yes, I do absolutely mean that. It's a situation. And then Garrett Temple's coming back, plus Aaron Aflalo came back. So how you could think that that's going to be a good situation to target when you've got like a 7-man or 8-man guard rotation, and I get it, some of these guys have to play small forward, and I also forgot Tyreke Evans. So you're looking at this big hodgepodge of guys. Tyreke Evans is the only guy out there that I'd be willing to take a chance on because I'm going to tell you how this is going to go. Lawson's going to have a big night one night. Hield's going to have a big night the other night. Aflalo's going to come through. Then we're going to go back to Hield. Then we're going to go to McLemore. And as an owner of only one of those guys, because you can't collectively draft the Sacramento shooting guards onto your fantasy team, you're going to be left with a lot of holes on a lot of nights that you're not going to be able to fill, which pretty much describes high school for me, but that's a different story. But yeah, that's a place that I would look to stay away from. I would go with Skal Bass because it's a much tighter rotation. They've only got 4 guys. Georges Papagiannis, I think, has already been shipped back down to the D-League. So you're looking at pretty decent minutes. I'm thinking he's going to hit 20, then to 22, then to 25. And as long as he's not bad, as long as he shows that he's able to keep in things and not make those rookie mistakes, he's going to see some time. All right, well, that wraps it up for now. If you have any questions, comments, or anything you want to talk about, feel free to post comments. I'll always respond back. I'll try to be nice as long as you're nice to me. In the meantime, subscribe to the channel. We are putting out DFS plays for basketball. Baseball is going to start, and even though I don't really like it, I'll still be bringing you all the information I can on that. And we're going to really start expanding here, so it's going to be fun. Head over to researchfantasy.com. Subscribe to our mailing list. Head over to Facebook. Like us there. Follow us on Twitter at Research and Win. And join us next time.